Thank you everyone for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed this series thus far. I've forgotten one thing in the last episode. I forgot to actually upgrade to Service Pack 1. So that's the first thing we're going to do in this video is upgrade MIM to Service Pack 1. Then we'll move on to configuring the MIM sync service. The initial configuration's there. It's not much. And then we'll actually connect some management agents and start moving some data around. So let's jump right into it. I've already downloaded Service Pack 1, and these come as installer patches, MSPs. That's the whole big ordeal before you actually had to uninstall MIM itself and install the MIM 2016 Service Pack 1. Actually uninstall the entire product, install the Service Pack 1. There was a bunch of throwback on that, and Microsoft changed it, thankfully. But for those that have already upgraded to Service Pack 1, you'll have to uninstall that, go back to the release to manufacturing build, and then upgrade. Or you can technically go to any of the 3 hotfixes after the RTM. And you can upgrade directly from those as well. So we're going to start PowerShell as administrator because these MSPs need to run as administrator, but by default they don't. So I'm just going to switch into my desktop and then that folder containing everything. The first thing we're going to run is the MIM sync service. That's the first item we installed. So we'll do MIM sync service and hit enter. And then we'll say update. So it's giving us a warning that the synchronization service is running and the setup needs some of the files. So what we're just going to do is we're going to open up the services MMC, and then we're going to go down to Forefront Identity Manager Synchronization Service and stop that. And then we're going to jump back over to our installer or updater and say retry. Now, if you've had any data in here, you see this prompted me to say that it's configuring the Squill database. So if you've had any data in here, you would want to make sure it's backed up or have a snapshot at least. So this has been successfully completed, and we'll say finish. And let's see if it started that. Just refreshing. It did start the synchronization service. So speaking of snapshots, I am going to make a snapshot here. And I'm going to say it's before the service and portal upgrade. And then we'll say yes to that. If anything's going to fail in this upgrade, I have a feeling it will be the service and portal. So that's why I'm taking a snapshot before that. So I'm going to go back to the PowerShell and start typing in FIM, and I'm going to hit tab here until I get to the service MSP, and I'll hit enter. Once the installer loads, you definitely see a failed installation may result in a corrupt MIM service database. To recover, you must restore the original database. Definitely it says back it up, so that's why I took a snapshot or a checkpoint. If you were going to back up the database, you'll need your encryption key to recover. But I'm going to throw caution to the wind and say update. And it wants me to stop it. I don't know why this installer couldn't stop it for us, but I'll jump back over and say stop. Then we'll try the update again, and we're off. And thankfully, everything went fine. So we'll just say finish there. And I'm going to refresh to make sure it started the services, and it did. I'll open up the Microsoft Identity Manager Synchronization Service Manager. And I'm going to go to Help and About and check my build number here, 4.4.1302. This is the build we want to be on because all the hotfixes are going to be released off of this build. You can ignore that it says Microsoft Forefront Identity Manager 2010 R2. Apparently Microsoft doesn't know how to use the find and replace option. So we're going to go to Tools and Options, and we're going to check, I've already done this, Enable Synchronization Rule Provisioning and Enable Password Synchronization. We'll check both of those. I'll tell you what Synchronization Rule Provisioning is when we get to it. The Enable Password Synchronization is for the password change notification service. And then we'll just say OK. We have 5 buttons up here at the top: Operations, Management Agents, Metaverse Designer, Metaverse Search, and Joiner. Each of these are different areas that you'll be in, some more so than others. I'll actually tell you about them when we actually get into these. So let's go to Management Agents first. This is where you can see all your management agents that you've created. And what management agents are, they're basically a little agent that connects data sources with Identity Manager. So the management agent it takes data and sends data to data sources. When data is modified in the data source, like Active Directory, it will pull it into Identity Manager. And when something changes where it needs to go to Active Directory, it'll send it over to it. The process of moving that data is called synchronization. And there are 2 different types of management agents. There are call-based and file-based. Call-based, that you'll find the majority of these are call-based. And they basically use an API function to import and export data. A file-based is basically it uses a text file to move that data around. There are probably around 30 management agents, some of which are already installed, some that you can actually go and download and install. But originally, with the default install, you can see the list here. That's probably 10 or so, give or take. And most of these are call-based management agents. They use API. I think the only one in the list, there's the limited text file and fixed with text file. Those are file-based. The attribute file pair text file is file-based as well. So as you can see, you can talk with Active Directory domain services. You can talk with the global address list for Exchange 2000, 2003, 2007, 2010, and 2013. You can talk with Active Directory Lightweight Directory Services. You can talk with files, the FIM Service Management Agent, LDAP, the actual LDIF file you can speak with. I believe that is file-based. And then you have Novell eDirectory, Oracle, and SQL Server. So we're actually going to start off with Active Directory Domain Services. We're going to jump in and add our SP-AD, and that's what I'm going to name it. Then we'll say Next. It's going to ask for our forest name, which is sandbox.local, and our username. Let's jump over to our domain controller here. Inside of Active Directory users and computers, we're going to be using the MIM account to synchronize or to connect with Active Directory through the management agent. In the documentation, it says you use the administrator account, but I'm not going to do that because how many times would you actually use the enterprise admin account for anything, really? So to use this, we're going to need to delegate some permissions. The first thing I'm going to do is right-click on the actual domain and go to Properties and Security. And I'm going to add the MIM account and go to Advanced. We're going to double-click on the _MIM account and scroll down until we see replicating directory changes. And then we'll say OK. Now we only need to do that on this object because it has to be done on the domain context. If you have more than one domain, it has to be done on each of those domain contexts. That allows delta synchronization, basically. So you don't have to synchronize the entire domain, just the changes. Now, we also need to do some other things in here. We're going to delegate control on our main office. Using the MIM MA. We're going to say it can create, delete, and manage user accounts, reset user password, and force changes at next login, create, delete, and manage groups, modify membership of groups, and then we'll say next. We'll do the same thing on remote office and say next and finish. If there were other OUs or other containers we wanted to add or remove users to, we do that as well. In production, we might want to create a group and add that user to the group and then delegate those permissions, but that's fine. I'm going to do it this way for now. So back while we're creating our management agent, we can actually specify the MMA account now with the password and the domain. Then we'll say next. If you have multiple domains in here, you'll want to choose your correct domain, but I'm going to choose my default one. There's an enable this partition as a password synchronization source. We won't do that yet. We'll need other management agents to send the passwords to. You can choose, if you click containers, you can choose only specific OUs or containers. And that's actually what I'm going to do. I'm going to say the main office and the remote office because I didn't give any permissions for these other OUs. It's going to run into errors when it tries to modify them. And I don't want to accidentally modify anything in my user's container. Now, if you do this, you may want to specify a different password change notification group because it's going to receive a change notification for users in the domain users group, but the users are not going to be in MIM. And we'll just say OK and next. We're not going to configure any provisioning hierarchy. The object types, we're going to select user and group and say next. And on the attributes, for now, we're just going to do the company, department, description, display name, employee ID, employee type, given name, group type, mail, member, postal address, postal code, physical office delivery name, SAM account name, SN, ST and street, telephone number and title, user account control, and then we'll say show all, and we'll scroll down to object SID. Oh, and I forgot one Unicode password. And select that. And so we'll go next. No configure filter, no join and provisioning rules, no attribute flow. And then with deprovisioning, this is an important section. If we say stage on delete on this object for the next export run, it's going to delete what's in Active Directory. We don't want to do that. For now, we're going to make them disconnectors. And then we'll say next. And then on here, we're going to leave it as it is and say finished. Now we need to create the MIM Service Management Agent. So we'll go to Create and choose the MIM Service Management Agent. And I'm going to call it MIM Service. And say next. The server is going to be the local host. The database is that MIM service. If you didn't change the name like I did, it would be FIM service. The FIM service base address is what you specified in the installer with :5725 at the end of it. We're going to use Windows Integrated Authentication. The username is going to be _MIM, MA, the password, and the domain. And then we'll say next. So you may receive a fail to connect to the specified database. If that happens, it's most likely that permissions were not granted. So you'll have to go into the SQL server and make sure that the MMA account has access to the database. It should only need read and write access. Then once you say next, it should allow you. Now we'll want to select all of these object types and say next. We'll want to click show all and make sure all of the attributes are selected. And then we'll say next. In the connector filter, we're just going to leave as is and say next. In the object type mappings, we'll say group, add mapping, make sure it says group, and OK. And then we'll do the same thing for person. Then we'll say next. Now here we will have to configure attribute flow. Anything that we want to go into the MIM portal, we'll have to configure an attribute flow for. So we'll choose person in the data source and person in the metaverse. We'll go up to the top and we'll choose account name. And we'll say export. And then I will allow the annul there. We'll go to display name on both. And then we'll add new there. The domain on both. Email on the data source. And mail on the metaverse. Employee ID on both. Employee type on both. First name on the data source and first name on the metaverse, last name on the data source, metaverse, object SID on both. Now we'll change the data source type to group on both. And we'll go through and do the same for account name, display name, domain, email to mail, mail nickname for both, member for both, object SID, scope, type, membership add workflow, membership locked. And then we're going to do account name to account name. We'll do import, and then we'll add displayed owner, display name, mail nickname, member, scope, and type. We'll say next. We'll leave them as make them disconnectors in the deprovisioning. Then we'll say next and finished. Now let's click on the SB-AD management agent and then click the configure run profiles. Run profiles are basically steps that are ran. So you can have one run profile that does the import and export, or you can have two profiles that do the import and export. They basically tell what operation the management agent should accomplish. So we'll create a new profile. I'm going to call this full import and say next. And then on the type, we'll choose full import stage only. Then we'll choose next and finished. Then we'll create another one called full sync. And then we'll choose full synchronization on that one. Next and finished. Then we're going to do that again for delta import. And we'll leave delta import there. Next and finished. And then once again for delta sync. And then we'll choose delta synchronization. Next and finished. And then one more for export, and we'll choose export here, next, and finished. Then we're going to go ahead and say apply. And then we'll do the exact same thing for the MIM service. Now we'll say OK. I'll start explaining those synchronization types when we actually start running those profiles. Now, one thing that we need to do, if we jump over to our MIM portal and go to users, and then we'll do a blank search here. We have two accounts. The account that is an administrator, not because of the display name as an administrator. It's basically the account you use to install the MIM portal. It will be displayed here. So it's an administrator of the MIM portal. And then the built-in synchronization account. We do not want to modify these accounts in most instances. So what we'll do is exclude those from any modification. So to do that, we'll click on the MIM service and say run. Then we'll run a full import. And it'll import, it'll bring back these two objects. So if we click on add, the number 2 next to add, and double click on the first item, we'll just take this distinguished name and copy it, and then we'll close out. We'll open up the management agent, and then connector filter on person. We're going to say new. DN equals with, and then we'll paste that and add the condition and say OK. We'll OK that. Go back in and do the exact same thing for that second item. Copy. New, paste, and add condition. These two values as of now have not changed, so you can actually look them up and enter them in without having to do that import. But we'll say OK. So if you look, there's only 2 accounts in here. There's nothing from AD. Well, we really haven't done anything yet. We actually need to tell MIM what to import. And to do that, we need to create what's called synchronization rules. So we'll go to administration down here in the portal and synchronization rules. So what are synchronization rules? Using synchronization rules is known as declarative provisioning. There are 3 types of provisioning. There is code-based, declarative, and non-declarative. Right now, we're just going to go over declarative provisioning. And so, as I said, synchronization rules are declarative provisioning. They basically say what objects are synchronized and what attributes of those objects are synchronized to and from Identity Manager. So, knowing that, let's go ahead and create a new synchronization rule. And we're going to call this SP-AD inbound. And we're going to say this is an inbound. And then we'll say next. The metaverse resource type is a person. The external system is SP-AD. And the external resource type is going to be user. And we're not going to have an inbound scoping filter. Since we've only selected the OUs that we want, we're going to actually import everything in Active Directory, or everything in those OUs. And then we'll go down to the bottom and say next. There are 2 scroll bars here, so I'm having a little bit of issue. The relationship criteria is going to be object SID is equal to object SID. and we will say create a resource in FIM. So what that's going to do is it's going to match these objects by their attributes. If it's not in FIM, or specifically the metaverse, it's going to create that object. Then we'll say next. And then we'll create an inbound attribute flow, or multiple ones actually. So we'll add a new one. The source is Active Directory, and what the source on that will say account name. The destination in the metaverse is going to be account name. Excuse me, the source in AD is SAM account name. Then we'll say OK. We'll create another one for display name. This time, both the source and destination are going to be display name. We'll do employee type. We'll do given name to first name. We'll do SN or surname to last name. And object SID. Now, this is an important attribute to make sure you add, because this is what we're matching on. So if we don't get this right, it's going to throw everything off its base. And then we're going to say the last one is going to be a string, and that's going to be sandbox. And then the destination on that is going to be domain. And then we'll say OK. Then we'll scroll down and say next. And it gives us a little, this is what's happening. And then we'll say submit. Now what we need to do is initialize our environment. And to start off with, since we created synchronization rules, we need to initialize the MIM management agent first. So to do that, we're going to run a full import, and notice there's one add, which is our synchronization rule. Then we're going to run our full synchronization. And we have, this isn't something we've done before, so this is a new screen. We have one projection. A projection is a creation inside of the metaverse. Filtered disconnectors are items that are ignored because we included these two accounts, the built-in synchronization and the administrator account. These are filtered disconnectors. And then that shows filters with flow updates, which is our synchronization rule. Basically, these items were updated. And now, even though there are no items to export, I am going to run an export. And then we'll do another Delta import. Since we've initialized the MIM connector, the synchronization service now knows what's going to happen with our two management accounts. So it knows attributes that are going in and out. So now's the time that would be good to go into the Metaverse Designer. My view's a little messed up here. And underneath person, we can see account name has one import flow. So if we sort that by reverse, everything has one import flow. Now let's go over to group. Everything has one import flow. Now let's go ahead and initialize our Active Directory Management Agent. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to run a full import, and it's showing that there are 112 adds. So we have our OUs here at the top, we have our groups, and then the rest of our accounts. And then we'll say close. Now let's go ahead and run a full sync. So what's happening here is our synchronization rule is saying we're importing these objects. We're importing these attributes. And the attributes are going to go to these metaverse attributes. So there were 99 projections, 99 connectors with flow updates. 13 were disconnectors. Those 13, I can tell you, are organizational units as well as groups. We did not specify any synchronization rules for those two object types. So all of these should only be accounts. Down here at the bottom, we see outbound synchronization to the MIM service. So it's wanting to add these 99 or project these 99 objects into the MIM service and update these 99 objects attributes. Notice these DNs are a little different because these are the MIM service DNs. So now we can actually populate the MIM portal or the MIM service database. And to do that, we'll run and export. So we have had 99 ads. And now let's finish our cycle here and run a full import and a full sync. So now if we jump over to our MIM portal and go to users and do a blank search, we have all of our users in the MIM portal now. So that's where I'm going to leave this video. So what have we done today? We've basically upgraded to Service Pack 1, and we've done the bulk of adding our configuration to our MIM installation so that we can actually pull AD accounts into our MIM portal. So that's it. Now, there are a few more steps that we want to do. We actually need to, having these accounts in the MIM portal, yeah, that's all fine and dandy, but what about creating accounts? What about doing things to these accounts? Well, we'll get to that. We'll do that in the next video. We're actually going to go in reverse and create some accounts in Active Directory. And we'll actually kind of try and align this to some of the business rules that you have of, oh, these account names are in this format, or the employee number is this, contractors are in these groups. So we'll start to align this to how you can translate your business rules as if you were doing this manually by creating accounts into an automated way. Thank you very much for watching this video. Hopefully it was informational for you. If you liked it, please click that little bitty thumbs up button. You can subscribe to me and also add me some comments. Talk with me, ask questions, and tell me what you like, what you are doing with your environment, or what you would like to do. And hopefully you'll stick around for the next video. And if so, I'll see you then.